Good morning.
Morning.
The blessing of the Lord be upon you.
We bless you in the name of the Lord.
Thank you. Intertestamental Period of History. And we are going to be on lesson 2. It's been a couple weeks. We've had fires, we've had COVID, we've had all kinds of stuff going on, so it's good to be back and be in our studies. Just to quickly review, we had an introduction of what we are studying, the 400 years between Malachi and the New Testament. And basically it was a period of time ruled by Persia, Greece, and Rome, even though it starts in the prophecies that we're looking at with Babylon, and it's going to include a kingdom that God was going to establish, has established, that will have no end. And we're talking about the fractured political climate that results from all of this, the Hellenization that even continues to our day, the Greek influence on the world and culture, and how that affected things in the first century when John and Jesus had their ministries. We also looked at Daniel's prophecy. I say Daniel's prophecies, we're going to study that, but we looked at Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's interpretation of that. And of course, that brought us to the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of, and 5 kingdoms. Of course, you had the head of gold, Babylon, the shoulders of silver, Persia, belly and thighs of brass was Greece, legs of iron, Rome, the feet and toes, part iron, part clay. That's the later years of the Roman Empire. But you have that 5th kingdom, and sometimes we don't express that like we should. It's that the stone from heaven, that's Jesus Christ, cut out of the mountain, fills the whole earth, but a kingdom that'll never be destroyed. But it's different than the other kingdoms because it's not necessarily a physical kingdom, it's a spiritual kingdom. It's the church of Christ. So we looked at the interpretation of that, which was pretty straightforward. And we looked at studied a little bit about the kingdom, church of God, Christ. Notice how we got that split up there. It's all the same. That's a special kingdom, and that is the teleological purpose for all things relating to the Old Testament. That's what God had in mind when, after the sin of Adam, this is how he was going to restore all things. Everything else in between was to bring about the Messiah and the establishment of this kingdom. And that brings us to the timeline. This is the last thing we looked at in that lesson, to give you the time frames, and it's history timeline from Babylon to Bethlehem. I picked this up off the internet. You know, it's fairly good. Not too many complaints about it that I can see. But again, we go back what we studied in the minor prophets. Coming up to, you have the exile to Assyria of the northern kingdom. Then you have the exile of the southern kingdom to Babylon. That was the time when Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they go in the first wave. Eventually, 586 BC, you have the rest of the ones that they're going to take to Babylon, from Jerusalem, going to Babylon. Then you have that 40-year or 70-year period from 606, the first exile, to 536, 70 years, 70 times 7 is 490 years, or it's 490. I'm going to rephrase that. You have 70 years to make up for the 70 sabbatical years that they did not let the land rest, which is a period of 490 years. Now that's going to be important because later on we're going to study, which we're going to look at Daniel chapter 8. We're going to go back to Daniel chapter 7 later because it's a different set of prophecies. There's a 70-year period that comes in the future that is also 490 years. It's 490 years till the time of Christ coming, or the Messiah coming. So you see the time frame, and what we're going to look at today is Daniel chapter 8, and that is clear back here in the time of the exile. Of course, we studied in this time period Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, as we ended up the minor prophets, and that's getting into the Persian period. Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, and then Rome. So we're actually going back to when Daniel prophesied all of these kingdoms. I wanted to develop that first. And once we develop that, we might get into a little deeper on those empires. But we always want to do it and how they relate to Israel and the coming of the Messiah. Does that make sense? We want to do it biblically because it is Bible class. Yeah. So in order to, again, we looked at Daniel chapter 2. That was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, calls in his soothsayers, his people to help. Hey, I had this dream. I want you to interpret it. Okay, what was the dream? No. If you're a soothsayer, if you're a prophet, if you're a seer, you'll tell me what the dream was. Well, nobody can do that, so he's going to have them all killed. Daniel comes in, says, don't kill them. Give me time. We'll get this straightened out. He tells him what the dream is, and then he interprets the dream. And it's what we saw, those 5 kingdoms, the statue. So here, it's a little bit different. Now, in chapter 2, it's like a glorious statue. It's gold, it's silver, it's bronze, it's like, wow, this is but that's from a human perspective. When we get here, it's looking at it in a spiritual perspective. Yes, it's physical about these kingdoms, but spiritually, what happens? So there are 2 components here in this. This is Daniel's vision. It comes, all right, start reading. Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. Why do I have Daniel chapter 7?
I thought you said we were on 8.
I did, but I was probably wrong. Daniel chapter 7. My mistake. Because I was looking, I've got next week's lesson at the bottom here. Daniel chapter 7. I'm so sorry. Verses 1 through 8. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Who was the king who saw the statue, the other statue? That was Nebuchadnezzar, right? So here you have Belshazzar. So Nebuchadnezzar's gone. Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. So this is about 553 BC. This is 100 years before, we'll say, Ezra and Nehemiah. This is 100 years before Malachi. Not quite 100 years before Esther, the book of Esther. Verse 2, Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Now, you're going to have in apocalyptic literature the four winds of heaven in the book of Revelation. I think you have it also in what? The book of Zechariah, where we studied some apocalyptic literature. But the four winds of heaven, that's the things that move things on the earth. The four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and the great sea is the mass of humanity. And four great beasts come up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. Now, I'll show you a picture in a moment. Does that mean it had a hump on its back, or does that mean it was like this, ready to strike? It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold another, like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. All right, we're going to stop there. It's in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, about 553. He sees this dream and visions in his head as he lays in his bed. He writes it down and then tells the sum of the matter. And the vision has 2 components, earthly and heavenly. This is the earthly component. We'll get to the heavenly component in verse 9. So the earthly component is a reiteration of the 5 kingdoms in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but really it's 4 of those 5 kingdoms. Rather than the 4 kingdoms being seen as precious metals and minerals, they are personified as ravenous beasts on the sea of humanity, blown about by the winds of destiny. See how that change of imagery? If Nebuchadnezzar would dream this, and Daniel would interpret it, that could change the whole course of history, because what would he do? We can't have that. No. Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom's a kingdom of gold, and the next one's going to be silver, and then bronze. See? They're glorious kingdoms in the sight of man. But if you view it from God's perspective and what God is trying to do with Israel, what was Israel's purpose?
That's to be God's chosen ones. His chosen ones. God's chosen.
But the purpose, what was their purpose? What was Israel's purpose? To bring Messiah into the world. They were chosen for that purpose. Right? So everything is coming for that purpose. But what are these kingdoms then going to do in relation to that purpose? Well, what did Babylon do to Israel?
Slavery and
The
bondage.
exile. But who lifted them up to do that? God did. Now, what did Persia do? Persia let them go back, but still kept them under the thumb, so to speak. Greece the same way, Rome the same way. They are seen in that sense as these beasts. And Rome, being, we'll see, gets the special attention as the last. Special attention as the fourth beast. Why? Well, while many of the ancient rulers claimed the title of Son of God, it was the Roman emperors who claimed to be elevated to the rank of deity and were addressed as divus, D-I-V-U-S. Augustus Caesar proclaimed himself to be God and to be worshipped. And then you go on with Nero and others, and that's why the church had so much difficulty. Christians were told, put a pinch of incense on the altar and say, Caesar is Lord. In other words, Caesar is God. They wouldn't do it. What happened? Okay, into the Colosseums, death, crucified, whatever, because they would not do that. So of the four empires, it was only the Roman Church that made war. It was only the Roman Empire that made war with the church. Catch that? Babylon opposed Israel. Persia opposed Israel. Greece opposed Israel. Rome opposed Israel, but only Rome made war with the church because the church wasn't established until the Roman Empire. So you look at Daniel chapter 7 and verse 21. What does it say? As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Okay? Now, when do the saints possess that kingdom? What's about 325, AD 325, when Constantine makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Isn't that amazing? Now, once it becomes the state religion, it starts to apostatize, but you see what happens there. It's the one that makes war with the church. Who wins? The church, God's kingdom. All right, any questions on that little part? So there's representations of these four kingdoms. Babylon, like a lion with eagle's wings, lifted up from the earth, man's heart given. The details, I don't know. But we know it's defeated. It's defeated by whom? Well, the Medo-Persians. And they're like a bear, raised up on its side. See, this artist representation gives it a hump on its back. That's where, you know, if I was doing it, raised up on one side, I'd have the paw ready to swat down. But it's got 3 ribs in its mouth. Well, that might be that, you know, it's destroyed 3 aspects of the Babylonian kingdom. I don't know. We're not really worried about looking at pulling apart every little detail for this. We're just looking at what Daniel is prophesying. Was told to arise and devour much flesh, and they did. The Persians, they ruled the world for a long time, that known world. We'll get into some maps here in a little while. The third.
Are they the ones, when it says devour much flesh, sacrifice their children and things?
I'm not sure whether they did or not. It's quite possible. Okay, but the devouring much flesh is more to their warlike attitude. Xerxes, who is Ahasuerus in the book of Esther. One of the things that I remember from first studying world history, I don't know why it started this way, but one of the first things I learned in school about world history was when Xerxes attacked Greece. And that was about, what, 490? I think I have it somewhere in my notes here. But it was a lot earlier than what it would seem like. But he had come, he had taken Babylon and had gone down, taken the area of Palestine and maybe into Egypt, but he had turned his attention to attacking Greece. And of course, I think the reason why that's the start I got with world history is because that's when Greece starts to arise. He had this great navy that he built a bridge with his ships across to be able to take his armies across to Greece. And then you get into like the 300, the movie with the Spartans. Is that and a lot of that's where they stopped the Persians and drove the Persians back, and that was really the beginning of when the Grecian Empire under Alexander's father, Philip of Macedon, began organizing or uniting the Greek city-states and then making their way into the Grecian Empire, and going where Persia came east to west, Greece goes west to east. Yes?
You were talking about the paw. Well, you see how his paw is down? Well, usually after a bear does their kill, they'll go out like that was their victory. I mean, their kill is done, and he's got his paw, and he's leaving his kill.
But I'm talking about, see this hump up here?
Oh, okay.
I would have it like this paw, or even this paw that he's swatting.
Okay, I see.
That's all I'm saying. So the Grecian Empire, like a leopard with 4 fowls' wings, 4 heads. And that will get into when Alexander dies and his kingdom is divided into 4 smaller kingdoms. But they're given dominion. Who gives them dominion? Well, of course, God is giving them that rule. And then the 4th, this exceedingly dreadful, terrible beast, iron teeth, 10 horns, a little horn which plucked up 3 some commentators get into that, and they think that little horn has to be in Antiochus Epiphanes. I don't think so. There's no time that the Grecian Empire made war with the church. It was gone a long time before. But if you read different commentators, you get different ideas. Again, I'm just trying to give you an idea of what's going on, what Daniel saw. Do you have any questions on that?
So the fourth is the Roman Empire?
Part? Yeah, fourth is Roman Empire.
Okay.
Yes, the dreadful, terrible beast, like iron teeth. Well, remember in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, what were the legs? Iron and clay, the feet, iron and clay. So now we get into the second part, the heavenly part of this dream, this vision. And it starts at verse 9. And it's entitled The Ancient of Days in my deal. The Ancient of Days is who? God the Father. Well, that makes sense. Look what it says here. As I looked, thrones were placed. Thrones were placed. What's that? Plural. Not one. How many? At least two. Okay? So we'll deal with that in just a little more. But you won't believe how many commentators miss that. All right? Thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. So, Elohim, how many times have we talked about it, is plural. It's a collective plural. Right? It's plural, but it refers to a one. And we talk about the Trinity. Trinity is not a word that's in the Bible, but comes from tri-unity. Father, in the Old Testament period, Father, Word, Holy Spirit, as Elohim. And we could say the God team, or as the King James Version would say, the Godhead. Follow me? But specifically, thrones were set. The Ancient of Days takes his seat. His clothing was white as snow, the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. A thousand thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Verse 11, I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. What horn's that?
Be God.
No, it's the Lord.
It's gonna be the Roman.
Roman Empire.
The little horn.
Yeah.
The little horn which plucked the three horns. It's speaking. But at that time, the Ancient of Days comes, there's thrones placed, and the Ancient of Days takes his seat. There's a judgment taking place. Where? In heaven. See the continuity of it? It's like, boy, where'd that horn come from? It's this one speaking great things. Yeah. Speaking great word, because the sound of the great words, the great words that the horn is speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. Okay?
You
What?
want switched it back up?
I will,
Okay,
but I'm reading right at the moment.
I'm sorry.
As for the rest of the beasts, which beasts is that?
The three previous.
Those other three. Their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So what Daniel is saying is, there comes this time when this little horn, he's taken over all these other kingdoms, but aspects of these other kingdoms have been enveloped into this kingdom. This kingdom is judged and a sentence is passed. Okay? Now it says, as I looked, the beast was killed and his body destroyed. But we know that when a sentence is passed, it's not typically immediately carried out. And the carrying out of this sentence is going to be a long time after. Because you've got the book of Revelation then in between. And you've got, if we're doing this in a historical perspective, this happens in AD 30, and the destruction of the Roman Empire does not come until like 476. Follow me? But Daniel's putting it out there. The rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged. The sentence is there, but the lives are continued on for a season and a time. So it's not an immediate thing that this fifth kingdom destroys all these others. It's going to take a while. Like I say, 325 years before Christianity becomes the legal religion of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire doesn't fall for what? Another 150 years. Okay, as long as you understand where we're going with this, the prophecy is there. The time frame may not be completely just as we would read it and understand it, but it's going to be destroyed. It's going to be taken away. All right. So, again, with the heavenly component, we go to verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. A son of man. Now he's presented here, right? So you have the Ancient of Days sits on his throne. There's thousands and thousands of beings around the throne. The books are open. These kingdoms are judged. Follow me? And here comes someone like a son of man. And he's presented. Well, what's he being presented for? He's presented before the Ancient of Days for judgment. Why? Because the books are open. Right? And he's judged. Now, these nations, these kingdoms were judged and found guilty and sentenced, and they're going to be destroyed totally. He is judged worthy to what? Let's read on here. He came to the Ancient of Days. He was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. The dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom should one that shall not be destroyed. Let's get a picture of it. This is the best picture I could find. I've got problems with it. Okay? I'll explain why. Where's your pointer? Grab your pointer. We can see from here, here's the Ancient of Days. Thank you. Here's the Ancient of Days. And he's on a throne. It's a movable throne because everywhere he goes, his throne goes with him, right? And it's a fiery throne, and fire's coming out. There's a sea of glass. Here's thousands and thousands, and the books are open, right? And here one's in worship. My problem with this is, what did the first verse say of that section? Not of the chapter, but of the section. What was said?
It's on night visions? Is that what you're talking about?
No,
Clouds of heaven came like, one came like the Son of Man.
no.
His throne was a fiery flame.
Verse 9. What did that tell you? What did that tell you was very important there?
Thrones, plural.
Thrones.
Thrones.
How many thrones do you see here? One. This should be over here. And there should be a throne on his right hand and a throne on his left hand. Thrones. A throne on the right hand should be empty. The throne on the right hand should be occupied, or on the left hand should be occupied by the Holy Spirit. Because what has happened? God the Word has become a human being. And he has come, he has taught, he has brought the gospel, he is the gospel to a large degree. He was offered himself as a sacrifice for the sins of men, crucified, buried. His spirit has gone to the Hadean realm. He has been resurrected. He comes back. He speaks to his apostles and disciples. 40 days later, he ascends to heaven. And this is that scene of him going to heaven. And this is recorded in Acts chapter 2. This is what Peter is talking about. He ascends to heaven and he sits down at the right hand of the throne of God. So what happens here is, in Daniel's dream, the Word, God the Word, has become a human being, and he ascends after his resurrection to the throne of God, and he is judged worthy to receive what? Dominion and power and glory, is that? And to receive a kingdom that should never be destroyed. Sit on my enemies, your footstool. That's from the book of Psalms, right? And that's what Peter records or talks about in Acts chapter 2 that Luke records. See that? Thrones are set. Now, I've talked to you briefly about a man by the name of Heiser. Okay. This is the divine, that would be the divine council. Father, Word, Holy Spirit. Word becomes Son in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, who is the Messiah. Heiser would say, oh no, there's a multitude of thrones here, bunches of thrones here, but that divine council is the gods of the nations. Baal would be here, Marduk would be here, Zeus would be here, Saturn would be here. And that's where I kind of really disagree with Heiser. If you read anything, Heiser makes some pretty good arguments about things, but it doesn't hold up over the length of the scriptures. Okay. Do you have any questions at all? But you see the representation there. This is what Daniel is seeing in this vision. So we're good there? All right, then we can go to the interpretation. And starting with verse 15, as for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this, and he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. But that's not an earthly kingdom, is it? It's a spiritual kingdom. Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from the rest, from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron, claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with his feet, and about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth and spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints. That was the key verse I talked about. Made war with the saints, and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms. It shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall rise, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law. And they shall be given into his hand for a time and times and a half time. Time, times, and a half time. 3.5 years, 42 months. What did we say that was? 1,260 days. But again, that's all figurative language. Verse 26, but the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed but I kept the matter in my heart. So, briefly, we run this down. Verse 18 in particular, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, forever and ever. And that's that forever, forever and ever. That's a time, times, and a half time. Right? Till the end time. The four beasts, four empires, are judged and condemned. Nebuchadnezzar's dream saw glorious kingdoms from a man's perspective. Daniel's vision sees typical worldly kingdoms tyrannically ruling over the masses. Sentences were deferred for what? A season and a time. A season and a time. The one like a son of man is judged and found innocent, deserving to be King of Kings. Acts chapter 2 and verse 34. King of Kings and Lord of Lords, right? He was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples and nations and languages should serve him, in a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. The saints of the Most High will reign with him in his everlasting kingdom. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. And Daniel 7:28 again. Here's the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed. What do you think? You know, what happens? What happens to Israel? What happens to Israel? Israel gets beaten up by Babylon, gets beaten up by Persia, gets beaten up by Greece, gets beaten up by Rome, and in the end, it's gone. There's a new kingdom. And Messiah comes. It's Messiah's kingdom. It's different. It's not Israel, physical Israel anymore. It's a worldwide kingdom. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. Peter writing to Christians, disciples of Christ, that you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his, that's God's own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, especially it's talking about Gentiles, once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. That's the change that takes place. Wonder why Daniel was so, his color changes? We're not the chosen people. Ultimately, Jews were not the chosen people ultimately. They were chosen for a purpose. And when that purpose ends, yes, they can be chosen afterwards. That's the end of it. Does that make sense?
Good, yes, sir.
All right. So next week we will look at Daniel's vision of the ram and goat in chapter 8. We will get to chapter 8. I thank you for your time and attention. I know that was a little long, but necessary point in what we're studying.